IAGA. You can see the new setup. Those from last VEMP CEO show wouldn't have yet seen this, but I've got both the camera at a higher angle, so you can see even more of me. Lucky you. I've got a light above there. I've got 4 screens now. I wish I could do the reverse, just so that you could all see the setup, because it's quite something. But we have a good friend of Sean's, who you may have heard as the Irishman in our chats, in our voice chats in the Telegram. And if you've spoken to him for more than 2 sentences, you would have heard the name Ape Records. And we have Jake, who is a CEO, founder of Ape Records today. I don't know, some people don't like the CEO label because it sounds too posh, but we'll say CEO anyway. Let's see what he thinks. Is it CEO?
We've never really given it a title, so it's not really a thing.
I thought it was Jake, not Jack Grealish.
Oh yeah, okay, nice. No, you got jokes straight away. I'll take that. That's cool.
I think it's the beard that does it. You're not as handsome as him, but you've got the same beard.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate it. No, I've just got back from the US, where I think everyone was playing the Robin Thicke card, which I've never had before, and so I didn't know whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. So Jack Grealish will take it.
He's not known enough in the UK really for us. Everyone just won't even say the things that everyone says about his Blurred Lines song. Hopefully they didn't hold that against you.
No, don't think so. All good.
Then again, you would know you are the music man. And for those who haven't guessed, that Ape Records is dealing with that side of the industry. Do you want to introduce yourself and the protocol?
Yeah. So we started Ape Records about March 4th. I think it was the day we went live. And it was set up with a basic premise. Sort of Greg, Ben, and I put it together. There was not great thinking about it, other than post-pandemic, a lot of creators, a lot of our peers were struggling financially. We can get into the economics and the reasons why shortly, but there was this sort of people needed support and help, and I guess we sort of thought this was a means to do it, where we could ultimately build something that would, part of its purpose would be able to pay out to creators around the world and community projects. And that's how it started, and it's sort of evolved since then quite considerably. But the basic premise was just to support music creators that needed it.
And when did you get into crypto, and what made you choose blockchain as the route to sort of support these artists?
I was never a crypto person. First off, I think I was the guy that probably went to Bitcoin conferences and walked straight past, which is probably not the wisest thing to have done for a period. I think for a bit of background for me, I sort of started out different space. Started off a company called Clockmaker, which was now today is sort of a blend between a creative agency studio / venture studio, where we have a narrative that's all about doing well, doing good, and building equity for others. And as part of my journey, from working a lot with brands and talent, started to move into the social impact space, dealing with charities, non-profits, anything ranging from like gender-based violence, criminal justice reform, a lot of the generational equity stuff. And it was, a lot of these things had challenges with funding models. A lot of them had visibility in terms of how they handled data at scale. And so I think that was the initial Pete's interest. My initial sort of journey into it was that I wanted to start like a bail fund for prisoners coming out of jail, and they would kind of operate in a DAO type model where that DAO would unlock capital for a business idea, and they would crack on. And I think that sort of journey sort of led quite quickly to music, and especially from my own journey, I've sort of managed an artist called Jelani Blackman for about 4 and a bit years. Worked with labels, publishers, creative side, business side, and sort of started doing a bit of a deeper dive into, I guess, the music industry now, which is like very reliant on streaming. And so how data is managed, which like we can talk about later, but that became more of a thing that could be solved through blockchain specifically.
Fair enough. And you had quite a launch. Were you like did you stealth launch? Were you VC backed? Did you have private investors or like a influencer round?
Didn't do anything. I think at 5:30 we weren't doing anything. At 6:30 we were. It was a case of literally Googling how to get the thing live. I think we thought we got it live at like 7:30, and people kindly told us that it wasn't live. So it was a case of scrambling around trying to figure out how that would work. And by 10 p.m. it was. 15 minutes, it was at $1 million. I think by the time I went to bed, which was like, I don't know, at 4:35 a.m. or something, it was at about 8 million or something like that, 6 to 8 million. And then by the time it reached 30 now, it was at like 21 million. So it's sort of, no, we didn't tell anyone about it, didn't tell friends about it. They just sort of went off, which is great. Yeah. So it was no, look, it was cool. I think what was interesting, we didn't, because of what we were trying to do, we weren't trying to be like a cool project. It was very much a case of even the way we released all of the supply. So it wasn't like we were holding stuff back and trying to like get it to pump, start selling off, doing whatever. It was like, look, let's just create a mechanic that should hopefully sustain it long term. But again, basic premise was to support music creators. So everything that happened beyond that was a case just trying to figure it out as we went on.
Fair enough. And you guys have I think, in fact, this coming from Sean, but you have a similar model to, or the contract was similar to MRI. And so, what is the breakdown of the tax system?
So we basically, it was literally a fork of that contract, and it was a buy and sell, 10 and 12% split. A small portion went to liquidity, 2 and 1 went into dev. So a pretty small amount, and the rest just went into paying out to talent.
Fair enough. What's the plan with? Because you guys have got quite a hefty LP. Last time I looked, because one thing I've noticed about a few projects is that with liquidity, if it gets if you get too much into it, it becomes really hard to like basically to push it up, because the same sort of buys that. If you have like a 10 ETH buy into a 20 ETH pot, it will pump by 50%. But if you have a 10 ETH buy into a 100 ETH pot, then it will only pump by like 10%. What is the plan with the liquidity? Are you guys looking to amend that, or are you looking to keep everything as it is? Or do you have control over the tax function? Can you change that around?
Yeah, we can change it around. I think what the main, I'll be honest, the main focus that we sort of have spent the last nearly a year now, but like definitely the last sort of six to 8 months was building products. I think that the token was great, but ultimately the token becomes valuable once it's attached to an ecosystem, as we've called it, that actually has real world value. So we've kind of done things a little bit, not really backwards, but we've started to build these things now. So we're going to kind of come out after sort of a period where I think we were pretty quiet for obvious reasons, where we can actually make sure that token serves the ecosystem that we've created.
So what have you been up to in the bear market?
Well, I guess what was interesting. So we started paying out money. It was great. Like the being able to pay out to peers and stuff was dope. I think sometimes people be like, "Yo, you're just paying off my debt." It's like, don't tell me that. Like, let's just move on. But especially when we started working with community organizations, like we did like kids tuition in Jamaica, Edna Manley College. Once we figured out the fuckery of trying to get money in, like you had every kid in that college suddenly wanted to learn about Web3. Things like that were dope. We did like work with Fem House in LA, do education courses, Black females. We did community music studios, Steel Pan Band academies, a lot of different stuff. And I guess working with the creator side, because we had this thing of like build equity. We were able to have completely different conversations than say somebody that was trying to sell them an NFT or say, yo, come on our platform, validate it, pump the price up, move on. We were very much of the stance of, we can't sell something to somebody that we don't understand, which is like, so we were approached by loads of people say, yo, use our products, it'd be dope. But we didn't feel that was the right thing. Certainly weren't going to sign people up to weird contracts. People have spent years trying to develop financial literacy for label contracts. Let's not get into Web3 just yet. But where we focused was more sort of the economics outlook, if you like, of where music sits now. So 88% of all music revenue in the US now goes through streaming, which is a key factor to acknowledge. And a lot of, if you speak to most music creators, whether they're an artist, even if they're label rights owners, etc., but if they're artists, if they're of the writing side, a lot of people had this, didn't really understand royalties, how these things are working, didn't understand like how it was shaped, why it was the way it is, how payments work. So a lot of our energy went into that space. It's like, okay, if we were to change the economic model of streaming, what would that look like? And then in order to get to there, we need to understand what is happening now so we can start to build a different outlook. So we started to do a combination of things, from looking into potentially where revenue was being lost or being missed, or where it was going and why it was going where, and then starting to work out, well, if there was a more equitable equivalent, what would that look like, and could we build it? And so we've sort of, when we talk about our ecosystem, we're going to do a little bit of a rebranding exercise to make it make sense as well. Love the Ape. Ape's cool, but it worked for a time. We very much wanted to build a music company that was very much focused, again, building equity. That would be the recurring theme. But also, if changing the economics of streaming is our North Star, then we need to build products that push to do that. And so clearly some of that will be on royalty collection and making sure that that's doing what it should. And then others was, we've announced recently a platform called Water, where we're going to flip the sort of model of streaming to be more equitable for all parts of that creative process. So if you understand the model now, the model is favored towards the rights owners, but the writers, people on the publishing side of the record, get paid a fraction of what you get paid if you own the master. And so we've got to try and create a balance to that. Otherwise, when you zoom out of the landscape of, let's just take the creator numbers on Spotify, for instance, and it was not shade at Spotify at all, which is important to note, is that you have, as of sort of end of 2021, you have about 1,050 artists that generate $1 million plus through streaming. And then when you peel that back further, you have 54,000 that generate 10K plus. So you have your earners, if you like, and about 55,000 people, which is interesting. When you start to look at the writing process for that, a DSP takes 30% off the top. The remaining 70% is put into a bag. It's kind of your cost of doing business. When you start to divvy that, the creator portion ends up being between 18 to 30%. And then when you break that down even further, the publishers get their bit, the artists get their bit, and the writers get their bit. When you look at that and you fully zoom out, that means the writer currently is worth about 2% of the music industry, give or take. So that is not sustainable. We ran a campaign in the UK, there was a campaign that ran the UK not long ago, where they had this ballet dancer called Fatima. God bless Fatima. And she was sat there looking particularly unhappy on a chair. It was like every train station, every bus station, wherever. And it was like, don't worry, Fatima, you can't be a ballet dancer because it's not financially sustainable. Become an IT consultant on 40 grand a year and life will be great. And so that energy is the very one that's like, if people aren't going to do something about it, we understand the economics, we can see some potential flaws contractually, and so we're going to move to start to actively do something about it and be very vocal with how we think that model needs to change. And we're not the first people to do this. There've been plenty of noises around it. You'll see articles every day at the minute of people saying, yo, this isn't sustainable. Like St. John did a thing the other day. If you find the video, and he's like saying, yo, if I wrote a hit song for Usher, 70 million streams, I got $1,500. So less. So like there's so many of this narrative that we'll pull out, but that has gone directly into the products that we've started to build.
Yeah, to be honest, like music, I know that there's been a lot of stuff done around NFTs, and in particular, well, obviously NFTs, but music NFTs in particular. But it's not. I think the main thing is that there's such a gap between why people think that they need to own it. I think that there's a gap between the fact that with like NFTs and images, you know, since it is something that you are looking at. I know most of them look like shit anyway, like image NFTs. It's not. I hate it when people call like NFTs art, and it's literally like it's like a picture of a monkey. Like, come on, who are you kidding? Like, that's not art. But I keep getting away from the point here. With music NFTs, there's like a knowledge gap, and I can feel it myself in the fact that there's the ownership on the blockchain, which is why NFTs are generally good for most things. So I think that the major drawback between like music NFTs and why people want them is that it doesn't necessarily, because it's a very useful utility, NFTs within music, but I think it's very artist and like ownership and rights based, and therefore it's hard to bridge that gap to make the consumer care about it, because the ownership functions are more weighted towards the actual like artist. So I don't think it has the same pull as like when you own the NFT yourself. It's like you own that piece of, you know, art, even if it's a bit of a monkey. But you know what I mean? As in, it's trying to bridge that gap and make it more appealing to the consumer as well as the artists.
Yeah, look, I think the stuff I heard. I mean, you hear a lot of nonsensical ideas of why it's relevant and why it's not, as well as some genuine use case. I think you just got to understand music first and foremost as to why that could be potentially interesting, and then you've got to say, well, as an industry or as a society, first and foremost, nobody learns through scarcity. Scarcity doesn't really change an industry. Like a individual creator that might have a large fan base might be able to sell NFTs as part of their membership as terms of like a building that community as a means to generate revenue. And that should not be like, someone shouldn't throw shade at that thinking, but that doesn't work for everybody, for one. And then you have some viable use cases which come from, you'll notice there's companies like Another Block who have done fractional ownership on catalog. They've auctioned it, it's community ownership. People are starting buying a share in the royalties. Super interesting. You're opening what is now a very investable asset class, which is rights, and everyone's realizing Bieber selling 200 million for his catalog, and Merck has kind of made that a thing. There is a use case there if you can make a market. So there's a company called Jukebox launching shortly. They'll launch with about $1.5 billion of catalog, so they'll be bigger than everybody else very quickly. They'll be bigger than 95% of their competitors because they own catalog, they know what they're doing with it, and they can figure out a way of making community ownership actually applicable because they own so much of it that they can build their own market in that space. I think there's a lot of people that try and complicate why music NFTs need to exist. We're just throwing out terms where they clearly just don't understand how music works. Like, regardless, even if you are doing fractionalized ownership, you need to understand how these things are monetized. You've got to understand what the liabilities are if you're a public company and you're paying out on like split ownership in terms of where the tax lies. You've got to understand that just because we use the word NFT doesn't make it relevant, doesn't make it interesting as something for music. So there's a lot of things to, I could probably talk about this for ages just to like go at it, but I think this is why we avoided that to start with, because I think there are multiple mechanisms. Once we, like crypto holdings, I don't know what the last look at it are, but it was about 5% of the world, give or take. It's probably changed slightly since, but it means that it's very Western world thinking with some of the applications. So if you go and pick up that logic and let's go to Ghana and look at it and go, do people care? Are people even equipped to be able to participate? Yes or no? then your argument is falling down pretty quickly. So we've got to solve some like fundamental like infrastructure levels first, and then we can start to work around that. But again, I won't throw shade on people that have managed to make money off NFTs, because if artists make money, creators make money, then that's a good thing.
We love a bit of throwing shade on here. Don't you worry. Throw as much shade as you like. The more drama, the better. But yeah, I mean, they're definitely gathering. I mean, I can think of a few off the top of my head. There's I'm trying to think. There's this guy on Twitter who is always tweeting about music NFTs. But I look at him and he looks like he just doesn't look like the type. I'm trying to remember his name. I think it begins with like a CH, something weird like Chunga or like Chumba or like something like that. But it's yeah, the name doesn't fit the actual personality. But we've seen a few. I wouldn't say alpha drops, because alpha is what we're going to ask you for on here. A few cryptic, excuse the pun, tweets from Ape Records, and you seem to be working a lot on the back end. Any alpha that you can drop for anybody watching?
Alpha. Well, look, I guess we've the new company will be called Matter. We sit in the background. We've focused on the elements, which I think was important: life, music, and I guess the tagline before: build equity for music creators, as I've said. Two key products. One will focus on royalties and the nuances to that. There will be a time where we'll go into royalties and why that's that's relevant. But if you understand the royalty mechanic currently for streaming, imagine you had an unopened bottle of water, if you like, unopened bottle of water. The water in the bottle is that sort of first class data that sits for everybody streaming the music, that's centralized. And then the way that money is collected and distributed, you have all the collection sites, all the countries around the world. You pour that water on the carpet. The carpet is everybody else. And then once you've all done your checks, squeeze water back into the bottle. You hope it's all there. That's what we'll be tackling on the royalty side. On the streaming side, again, as we've said, is that the current economic model of streaming does not work for everybody. It does not work for the general creator. It does not work for writers. It does not work for, there's a lot of reasons why. The music industry grows year on year, which is great, but that model, it's just not sustainable. There's a secondary case of that where you'll hear metadata being talked about in music as something that's important. Metadata is important for music because you start to record on a master and publisher side of the record effectively who the music belongs to, who have contributed to those records. Now, if you do some basic stats, unfortunately, with the way that some of these structures came about and streaming came about and was adopted, some things were missed along the way because it's like an admin task, and there was no like tech interests versus other interests, and everyone kind of tries to deal with their own, but missing a couple of things. So there is a big metadata problem with ultimately mainly the publishing side of record, because it's not a legal requirement to submit publishing information when you upload music on streaming. You have a lot of scenarios where the metadata set is incomplete or inaccurate. So you can average that out. So let's just say it starts to look at about 10% of all music on streaming is no metadata, no publishing whatsoever, 25% incomplete, which means that at the rate of this year, Spotify alone, that's 100,000 songs a day, give or take. That means you're at about 9.1 million songs by the end of the year with inaccurate metadata. You scale that up, that means that if metadata is not correct, you're not paying out correct. If you've got no way of checking, so if you're a creator and you've got your black box royalties that people talk about, there's a lot of holes here in terms of you have no real way of knowing whether you're being accounted for correctly or not. So we just create a compound problem. And again, because the economics aren't in favor of writers, we really need to make sure that metadata is correct. So a big part of our focus there on the back end is making sure that is corrected as well. And again, we're not doing this for purely ourselves. And by having the conversation, if everybody gets better at it, then we've done a good job.
From a personal, I mean, so as the user and as the sounds weird, like it. Well, the word for it is consumer, but it just sounds odd to be a consumer of music. I mean, technically a listener. I guess if everyone is earning more money, and that if the artist is earning more and the writers are earning more, inevitably, even though the consumers aren't directly benefiting from this, they will benefit from trickle down economics in the way that, if the cost is getting reduced because people higher up the chain are earning more money, you would argue that that would eventually come down to the consumer and make streaming better value as a consequence of that. Am I talking nonsense or am I making sense?
A little bit of nonsense, but it's not like actually it's accidental nonsense. I think that the reality is what we did originally is that we tried to make music free. And as we transition to streaming from buying physical records, that obviously creates problems because that's people's art. The same way you've talked about digital art and people like secondary markets. Like ultimately, it's not a change that trickles down to say, oh, now I can justify spending £1 on streaming, or whatever, or $1 on streaming. It's ultimately trying to change the model. So let me explain it this way. So in the way that music works now, a stream is categorized as a download or a sale. There's an important clarity for that, because if it's categorized as a download, it means you can apply different metrics to if it was a license, to which licenses are used in sync worlds, load different spaces. And the nuance is, if it was a license, then the writer actually achieves parity with the artist and the label in terms of that money. So it becomes actually a 50-50 split, but just by the way you categorize that music. And so these like nuances, basically, regardless of where you settle to and you create a new sort of model, the writer's moving from what we talked about at the start, this 1.82% of the market for how much you value, to a point where the writers become, they build equity so they become valuable, or they become seen as valuable, and it is valuable to be a writer. And you flip that again, you go, look, people talk about the TikTok funnel of music, right? We've become, as a society, become like, so everything's instant gratification. Everyone's like, crypto, when this, when that, when this, when that. Music, we're algorithms, we're singles. So we're losing the art of artist development. We're becoming so passive with how we consume music, so we don't really care about the music as much. Our behaviors are changing, and all these things have a detrimental effect. So if we look at the way even music is signed, if something is popping on TikTok, that first 15 seconds, yeah, dope, let's sign it. We know it's going to make money and it's going to cross over. But you're losing the sort of certain artists that are the reason why music is so great in the first place, is that the art of storytelling. And so if we keep the writers at this point and we make it not viable for them to have a career, then the songs get worse. We get more AI nonsense with songs as well. And the AI problem at the minute is kind of like the technical term would be trash in, trash out. How do you verify what's good and what's not? But you're moving towards a space that is not really great. is my nice way of putting it.
One thing I can't stand is the fact that I don't actually. I think I do have a TikTok. I think because I've been the team keep on trying to convince me to do them, and I said I'm not doing them directly. I can't stand thinking that. I can't stand people thinking that I think that like I'm worth watching. I'd rather them like, at least with this, like people have to log in, like click on it. But to actually like sit there and film yourself and I can't get over that point. But I hate that my wife loves TikTok, and I hear the TikTok songs and then they're all like the UK number ones, and I think like, why is that our like society now? If it's on TikTok, it will become like a top song. And I don't know how if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
31.
So you're similar, a little bit older than me. So you will be around when the charts used to actually contain, people who could play instruments. Actual like Sum 41 were on there. Like you could be like not even a metal band, but like a rock band like Offspring, Sum 41, Linkin Park, and stand a chance of getting into like the top 20 or the top 50. Nowadays, it's impossible. I can't name like the last time that there was actually an instrument playing band. I mean, maybe I sound like an absolute old.
There's loads. There's loads. Like, look, I think again, music is it's subjective, isn't it? There's loads of different things. I think that the TikTok thing is a real thing because it's real based on the financials. That's why. Because if something is already moving, there is already an audience. It's going to cross over. You can kind of semi-guarantee the numbers of streams that's going to be there. So it's all about mitigating risk. That's why it becomes more prevalent, because you can sign something. If I sit on the label side, I could sit there and say, my appetite for risk is in this market particularly is a little bit less. I know that I can invest a certain amount of money here, knowing that I'm going to earn that much back. So therefore it makes more sense to focus on these things that are already popping now. It doesn't make it a bad thing. I actually went to talk with LL Cool J, who's like, it's hilarious. And he sort of summed it up really, really well. It's like music, when he was around, when he was like popping, it was like you had to be signed to a major. Had to be signed. If you weren't signed to a major, no one heard your music. It's kind of where we've glamorized the signing of a record deal. It's kind of where that comes from. Because if you did that, you were like, yo, life is good, crack on. And so there was a much smaller pool of people that were in that bracket. Once you were there, you were in a good space. Now, everybody is a music creator. Everyone makes music, whether you're a chef, whatever it is. The volume of music has gone up so much. The sort of the capacity for, like, you see the volume of songs uploaded every single day. So that curatorial element is definitely needed, but as two separate challenges. One is the jungle, one is the desert, both challenging, but need different tactics, so to speak. And I think the musicality of stuff, like personally, there's amazing music being around, amazing artists. You've seen the sort of rise of Amapiano, Afrobeats, Afro House. You've seen like there's amazing artists that are coming through, even like younger artists. The challenge is where I guess we're focusing is less on the talent that's rising to the surface, because I always think that great talent, it does do that. It's more that the economics for getting there. If you're a writer and you have a Grammy-winning song, that might be the only Grammy-winning song you have. And as a writer, that's kind of your pinnacle for that moment. As an artist, that's your pinnacle, whatever that is, whether you like fuck with Grammys or not. That's your thing. If we normalize not making money from that process, and we instead paint the narrative as, well, now you're a Grammy winner, you can get into better rooms, you can earn better fees elsewhere, you can earn more money from brand deals, and there are negative connotations to that. So that's what I'm saying, is that we are in danger of devaluing art if we don't change the economics versus.
Yeah. I certainly agree with the fact that, like, I mean, it's almost like there's a certain element of like putting out a song that is almost it's like some songs are like almost like engagement farming with music, as in like, XYZ, if you can monetize XYZ content, then you can always produce that content fairly securely, and that devalues music as an art, in my opinion. If you can, like, get to that stage where you can produce something, because there's certain elements of music, like, that's whether it's like a target audience. For example, like, some people will produce music commercially for advertisers, for example, and there's always the argument of art is subjective. But yeah, I guess what I get worried about with music in particular, and with like stuff like TikTok, is the fact that if people start producing content in order to for it to become viral on TikTok? Is that still an art?
No, like you're playing the system, right? So there's a system that's there. That kind of is what. If you sat in any label meeting, it's like, yo, get on TikTok, do your TikTok stuff, because you know that it's unlocking an audience. And then so I guess that the sort of the rules of engagement change slightly. So look, it's a very clearly something that you have to be aware of now. It's not it's not like this sort of small startup thing. That's a very pretty prominent feature, and the stats all backs that up. I think that the point is, if you accelerate, again, this economic outlook is that, and you value the writers less, who ultimately write the songs, then by logic, by own definition, the songs get worse. And then we sort of end up in a position where it is exactly what you're saying. It's like, it's very commercial led. One of my first takeaways from crypto energy, if I'm honest, and certainly the people that came into the music side, was that everyone was rushing to make money. It was like, yo, join this thing, validate us, make a shitload of money, and then we'll figure out what to do after that. No one was like, again, it's the same energy right now, where for young artists, creators, whatever, we glamorize the signing of a deal. Whereas in essence, as we've discussed, the signing of a deal now is very different to what a signing of a deal used to be. And if you're not aware of all these different stages, then actually the work starts once you sign. So, and if you don't understand your advances, these are again problems that you're going to spend all your money. You're not going to have any sort of financial guidance. Thinking like, shit, I'm in a contract where I've got an option for 3 albums and I've got no money. What does that mean? Oh, well, you can tour. Okay, well, the album hasn't really connected yet. Okay, now what do I do? And so there's just levels to this right the way through that I think we can have open discussions about, and that's what we will create that forum as part of everything that we're doing now.
Fair enough. And how would you summarize, even though you've already mentioned about some drawbacks and without pouring water on some elements, how have you found the experience so far of coming up to like a year? Or was it? Well, you said March, didn't you? So yeah, literally almost at a year. How's it been overall?
I think it's like peaks and troughs, isn't it? I mean, it's hilarious. It's like starts off and you have like dopamine levels pretty high. Everything's just going yeah, and cool. You have that element. I'm just trying to put do not disturb. And then you have times where you're just sort of dealing with everything that comes with it. I think the reality is we said this, like there was a thing really early on. How do you act ethically in an irrational market, right? And I think eventually you've got to if you're constantly trying to go where the noise is, where the hype is, and where whatever's coming next, you can spend a lot of energy and get nowhere really fast. You can end up completely exhausted and drained by the process. And I can see why a lot of these things end up rug pull. If I'm honest, I can see why. I imagine some projects start with the best intention in the world, and then you get into it and you're like, this is a lot. This is a lot to maintain. The plan hasn't gone into it. No one really talks about what happens if things go wrong. We always talk about when things go right, when it pumps, when it does whatever. And then if you don't have some solid rationale underneath and a very clear direction of travel, then yeah, it just becomes like, let's just throw shit at a wall and hope something sticks. And I think we had elements of that because, to be honest, as we didn't tell anyone, the natural thing is when it goes from 0 to midnight in the space of a day, you have elements of being like, okay, cool, everyone's expecting you to know what to do. And so you like, have to give out this, like, yeah, everything's cool. We know exactly what we're doing. But secretly, you're trying to like work out, okay, cool, this is like not what was expected, but this is what we have to do. And then you slowly, I think is the sort of advice I give to some other people, is to be open and honest and to have some of these chats is like, yo, it's fine to not know exactly what you want to do, but eventually you've got to set yourself very clearly on this is why we started this and this is where we're heading as a business. And I don't care about what anyone else is doing at all. This is what we're doing. And that's what we've had to do. And I think the moment that happened, honestly, like completely different human being, because then you're not bothered. Everything else is completely irrelevant. And then it's just like, right, cool, crack on, find the right people, find the right energy, the right people will find you. Let's go.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. Something I always, literally, I think I say it on a lot of podcasts and definitely tweeted it out as well, is that like the problem with founding a project in particular actually founding a project in crypto, because for some reason, if you start a business in the real world and it fails, it's like, oh yeah, well done, you gave it a go. If you start a protocol in crypto and it fails, you're a no good scammer and you ran away with all the money. There's just you can't fail in crypto without being a scammer. And the toxic nature of crypto and like the what's the word I'm looking for? The entitled attitude of everyone expecting to be a millionaire overnight. You have to have like solid morals as a developer and as a protocol owner going into it, because the risk is, and I've said this before, is that if you are honest, you're treated like a scammer, and if you're a scammer, you're treated like a scammer. So what do you expect? If people even have a slight part of them that's immoral, a lot of them are going to think, well, screw it, everyone's treating me like this anyway, so I might as well do it. And that's the big risk with crypto, because there's a hell of a lot of like just very vile people. Like, as in, like, I've had people who like delete accounts and then just set them, like just giving me constant abuse, like for doing nothing, just for existing. And it's like, the problem is you do so much to like support your token, and like people think that you're just like milking them. So there's a real risk, in my opinion, of people not getting into this industry, and I'm not surprised that they don't, because like if they've experienced it, then imagine someone coming over from like, imagine any music artist or record producer starting a crypto community and like getting like when pump or why dump, like they'll just think like, this is like so childish, like who are these people? So I definitely
100%.
feel we let ourselves down as an industry in the fact that we sort of allow it.
Yeah, but it's like anything, it's new, isn't it? So like it's the same whenever there's like innovation. I think you got pros and cons. I had no idea what WAGMI meant when I started, so everyone kept saying that. I was like, no idea what that was.
Every Friday.
Yes, you sort of a number of phrases. Is like, what does that mean? What does that mean? But I think one thing I would really like, I think time is always a good measurement, actually, because like if you are kind of jumping in, jumping out, like you question what you were doing in the first place. I think it's going to go through phases. For anything that's like new, will go through a lot of change, and ultimately the people that kind of go first, and even if they fail, they've been instrumental in other people coming along, and you've got to support each other as a community. I think the one thing I really like about where we've ended up now is that people that are part of the project understand what it is we're trying to do. Whereas I think when you first like come out all guns blazing, you have loads of people who are there because of a candle. They're like, right, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And you kind of go, well, it's cool to do that, because ultimately people are going to get emotional about money, right? That's just a reality of life. If you lost a load of money, you're going to get pissed off about it. Like it's happened. I had to, something that, I mean, I've not really kind of been big in investing in lots of different things, but I had something that was a rug pull, and it was like, oh, would have been nice if you just flagged it versus just disappeared overnight. Don't have the energy to. I'm not a public moaner.
At the
So
same
it's like,
time, though, if like if the CEO of a company sells shares, for example, nobody cares in the stock market. I was in the stock market for ages. Like nobody even looks at it. But if your protocol makes money in crypto, like people expect it to be given to them. As in, like, you can't building an actual business. So the problem with a lot of like protocols is the fact that there isn't actually any sort of like revenue model. Like revenue and profit is like such a hard thing to come across in. Funnily enough, I was talking to my team about this and saying, what are some examples of like businesses that earn like solid revenues? And the immediate one that people thought was ENS, Ethereum name service, the .eth, because it's like solid, constant, stable coin revenue. There's revenue generating protocols where they earn back their own token or people spend their own token. But I mean like solid, stable income that's either in like Ethereum or like whatever the layer one is. But it's just the fact that like you need people to make money. If again, it's like what you mentioned about that's needed for the music industry because it is an incentive. But again, it's just about balancing that and realizing that if people, if the actual people developing the protocol don't make enough money, then they, a lot of people think that tokens can survive every token can survive independently of a team, and if the team was like there, I think a lot of people don't think about the fact that still to this day 99% of tokens or coins they need to have the business still functioning to look after that token, because if the business fails, then that's it, it's over for everybody, including the team, including the community. And I think a lot of people don't think about that.
But I think it's kind of our energy, right? If you don't have a revenue model that's not a token, it's not a business. You've just kind of got something that's floating around that kind of can go up and down based on perception or whatever it is. And I think that was again our sort of energy, if you like, is to make sure that, and also that's like because of our North Star again. Like you have to have that. Like if it doesn't make money, then what are you doing? And my thing as well, I guess going back to my business before this, is that we speak about this idea that the whole do well, do good thing is that people need to make money. So that's the commercial business success, right? This whole doing good side, social impact, is usually viewed as like this CSR piece. It's like, oh, we should probably contribute to it. It's why you have like virtue signaling, people showing up for Black History Month and then disappearing, blah, 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 blah. Actually, you'll see, and it's probably a route forward for sort of non-profits and charitable organizations, is that when the two come together and very intentional with that narrative, then actually that's a far more sustainable business model, because the charities constantly ask the businesses for money. The businesses want to contribute as tax write-offs and like moral compass. So you spend all your time trying to get people onto the bus. So you've got maybe a North Star that might be eradicating extreme poverty, and you bring people on, and then you've gone off course by accident. So if you can have that really clearly built into the fabric of what you're doing, then personally, I feel a lot better about it as a business. Like Greg, Ben, and I have spoken about this. Anyone that's associated, and so we can get to certain milestones, and we go, cool, yeah, there's money there, but we've also managed to do this at the same time. So I think that's the key thing. We saw a lot of tokens that kind of just existed based on like influencer marketing, sort of who posts about it, which is cool. We actually stopped artists doing the videos one stage because we didn't ask anything to do anything, but the videos in the end came across as, it was like, yo, promote our shit because we're giving you this. So it became a little bit like a transaction, which is fine. It's perfectly within reason to ask for that. But if it does, it's like, why are we doing this? Are we doing this because we want to inflate the price of the token on like a superficial gain for a short term? Or are we doing this because we have their best interests at heart? And I think because if you keep making those decisions, again, this is where ethics comes in, you actually go, well, actually, the better use of time would be to have stronger conversations about things that aren't awkward, to get like Slim Jimmy to do a video whilst on a private jet, right? To get, which is dope that he did that. Like, come on. But like just to reposition that slightly and go, okay, we could use the same energy into building something that works for them.
Yeah, agreed. To those in the comments, just so that when we're wrapping up, I don't end up not allowing your comment and question to be answered. Whilst I am getting those questions in, where do you see and what do you want the next 10 years of the music industry to look like?
What do I see the next 10 years looking like?
Yeah, in the music industry, where do you see it going? And if you could change that direction, what sort of positive change would you want?
Okay, cool. Well, this year is the 50th anniversary of hip hop in the US, which is dope. I look at hip hop. Hip hop has been about innovation. I would say innovation is hip hop, like at its core, and it's influenced every sector, every market in the world. I'd say that whilst we can look back this year on like some amazing people that have contributed to that and that have kind of been the sort of door openers for so many other people, we can also look back and say this, we have a lot of sort of like bits in there that we try and sweep under the rug about like equity, about missing money, about people not being paid and all this sort of stuff. And I think if we can look forward now, what does innovation look like for the next 50 years? Then I think that starts fundamentally with equity, with transparency, with people having a really clear understanding of how their business works, and there being certain parameters, if you like, the sort of guardrails within bowling alleys, where we protect the very creators that the industry thrives upon. And so I think that piece is probably one of the most powerful, because if we can do that, then everybody wins. And if we can start looking at the fact that it's less about trying to profit off all those around just kind of for pure business objectives, if we can kind of build that collaboration again, you will end up with a much better relationships across the board, and I feel better work will come from that. And we talk a lot about critical paths, and ultimately, like there's an African proverb which always stuck with me, because each one teach one. And I think if we can create that narrative for creators, then not only will people feel more willing to collaborate from where they're from, from where they've come from, like how do they sort of spotlight artists coming out of Nigeria. Nigeria has, like, in Africa, top 10 streaming artists from Nigeria at the minute. How do those artists, if Wiz can come out to the O2 in London and sell it out in 12 minutes, how does he bring the next Wiz through and do the same? And so I think that culture, that sort of, and not culture as everybody else talks about culture, that sort of mentality, if we can foster that, then that is a really great direction for where the music industry can go. If we don't do that, then I would look at it like to a point where eventually you get to a stage where something gives. And whatever that is, that's like, we can all kind of argue onto that, but something will definitely give. And so choose which one you want.
Cool. I mean, you've mentioned it fair amount, so I presume that it's probably the answer to this question. But you mentioned a lot of like Ghana and Nigeria and other African countries. The question from who asked it, from SS Forever. Hopefully they don't mean the German SS. SS Forever SS1. What kind of musical genres and artists is Ape Records going to be supporting and focusing on?
I mean, it's kind of like genre agnostic, if you like. I think personal bias. I'm allowed to just say that. Like, I'm a big hip hop R&B fan just from general life, but I think I spent 2 weeks in Ghana from Christmas, New Year. I think, like, in the last few years, like Afrobeat, Summer Piano, Afro House has taken over. It's very much being exported to the world. So we'll have a big focus on that. If you take Africa as a again, zoom out, Africa's interesting in terms of the fact that last year the music revenue started to surpass traditional exports for the first time. And when you look at where that money goes, none of it currently stays on the continent, which is a problem, massive problem. So people don't pay licenses, there's all these different things. So we've got to find a way of ultimately changing that process. And anyone that spent time on the continent will realize that, yeah, Africa's the future, man. There's a lot going on. And so, yeah, personal preference. I mean, look, Afrobeat, Summer Piano is vibe music, Afro House. So that'll always be like, come on, we'll focus on that naturally.
Fair enough. This one I think was already answered, but which was, will this new model be less expensive for the user, not writer, producer, distributor, etc.? I think you I think we covered that within it.
We do one thing from a user perspective. I think so. On stream platforms, you have data for how you categorize fans and the levels of fan. So if it's not public data, but say if I go on and search for a particular song and I save that song and I playlist that song and I shout about that song and I share it, it automatically grades you differently versus someone that just kind of jumps onto a playlist and plays it in the background. And I think because of what we talked about before, we've become more passive with how we consume music. In order to counteract that, we've got to find ways where we can reward people that engage with music. There's like the dopest venue in Miami called Dante's Hi-Fi, which is run by Rich Medina, who's like everybody's favorite DJs, like just proper OG. And the energy in that space, if you go in, is that everybody is only there for the music. Anybody that's there to cause a problem, to kind of be on their phone, to be chatting shit, get out. And so our energy with that is that how do we reward behavior where people genuinely love music from a consumer level, but also from an artist level? Because if you can foster those relationships with fans, I feel like that is a more balanced relationship for how that revenue should be rewarded. And in the same way, if we see songs popping off on TikTok, if we can start to understand that actually consumers have real taste into what that sort of this next iteration is, then we want to reward that process as well.
So what you're saying is, in this club, chat shit, get banged.
Basically, yeah.
Oh, we got a hell of a final question, which is way too deep for this actual conversation, which was trying to act ethical in any market poses at the fundamental question of, is capitalism ethical? Bet you didn't expect that one, did you?
I mean, there's layers to that question, right? I think it depends. If people had money that fundamentally have sound ethical principles, you'd be able to do better things with that money. So I don't think the answer is to sort of ever to, in the same way, like if charities, I forget what the stat is, but it's something like, it's high, something like the sort of 70% or something. Like the money raised for charities is through business and high net worth individuals. Mm. So like I say, the reality dawns is when the better scenarios, when these things can merge and sort of like better ethical principles, better sort of sound, like very clear intentions, you are able to do more positive things. And I think what's interesting, even when you take that in the context of AI, I always found this interesting. There's a guy called Mo Gaudat who used to run Google X, super interesting guy. Talks a lot about AI and kind of says we're all kind of screwed unless we start treating them like human beings. But it's the same principles. When people started to launch these AI sort of bots on Twitter, on wherever, on different social platforms, these things shut down. Microsoft had theirs, like Google, they were shut down in like 7 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. And basically what they've done is consume all of the shit that people start talking about online, all of this like energy of whatever that is, and it absorbed that and started to make decisions based on what it was ingesting. And so very quickly it became homophobic. There were racial slurs. There were lots of different things based on what people were already giving it. So again, I think like if people in positions of authority had sound ethical principles, I'm a core believer that I think societally we would be in a better place.
Fair enough. That is a good way to think about it. You're a product of your environment. But yeah, I mean, thanks so much for coming on. It's very good, especially because we haven't had any music-based protocols on, and I myself definitely needed a good lesson on it. So teach as you did. But yeah, make sure to what's your website and socials?
So we'll be having new ones shortly, but the one that still currently exists is apinrecords.io. But we will be doing a full refresh shortly, and as a list of the products, if you like, shock that we're Elements, you'll kind of see the periodic table start to pop up. with the different verticals we go with. But our sort of main 4 to start with will be air, that'll be focused on the royalties, water, which will be on streaming, earth will be on music distribution, and stems, which is our sort of digital membership, digital asset that will plug into the ecosystem as well.
Good stuff.
So,
perfect. Well, thanks so much for coming on. I'm sure we'll have you back in the future. Let us know when the new website and branding's out. We'll be sure to give it a share. And thanks so much for coming on.
cheers, mate.
See you later.